And and we're back for season two, episode eight. Today we'll be recording with Elliot Ross. Elliot Ross may not remember this, but back in 2016 I met him at Witness Live, and I called him a serial entrepreneur, and he kind of laughed in my to his face. He was sort of embarrassed by the coinage, but I feel like he's built two brands, and one of them was sold for a lot of money. So I feel like he's a very successful person and a great guy to real pro, and then also a very empathetic person with disabilities of person. So anyway, so without any further ado, please welcome Elliot Ross.
Hey, how's it going? You good? Yeah, all good. Can you hear me all right? Is it all working? Cool. You all good? Can you hear me? Oh, that's no good. I can't hear you that well. I don't know if that's the same issue. Speaker. So that is that. Yeah, so I've got audio coming out on my side. Can you hear me?
I can edit
here. All right. Yeah, you're sounding. I can hear you just about. It's kind of hard to hear you, but I think it's all right. Is your mic on or whatever? Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I don't hear you at all.
Oh.
Wonder if I can disconnect my headphones.
Yeah, it could be.
It's very strange. I'm disconnecting my headphones.
Okay. Oh, I can't hear you talking now, but I can. You're on mute. That's exciting. I can press a mute button.
All right, so I'm unmuted now.
Oh, there we go. I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Okay, and I hear you now also. For some reason, let me try to reconnect my headphones. That for some reason screwed things up, but shouldn't. Okay, talk again?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah, could you hear my intro?
Yeah, no, that's all good. Let me put on my influencer light. There we go.
All right. Yeah, I got lights all over me. I'm lit up like a TV studio. Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Now we're rocking.
All right. Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Turn this off. Sorry.
All right.
There we go.
Let's do it. Is that your home office?
Yeah, I work at home now. We had we do have an office, but the UK, we're meant to be working at home and all that kind of stuff. So it is what it is. But yeah, I mostly work at home. Yeah, my team is in America. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of it. So.
Oh, you mean the Spark Post team?
Yeah, or Amsterdam or whatever. So I am around for the UK people, and I see them a bunch of times, but they don't kind of report to me or anything like that. So I'm more I go see people, but I don't need to be in amongst people every day kind of thing. Everything else is online, so I might as well do it at home, right?
Is the UK totally functioning, in terms of Omicron and everyone's going to work and getting COVID and marching on?
UK never functions properly, but we're doing all right. Omicron is high, but it's going down. I think there's a lot of people have it right now, and the government advice is really just go out and work and it doesn't matter. It's just a cold. I mean, it's
right. Yeah, okay. I think that's mostly what's going on here also. Yeah. I mean, they want you to quarantine. If you catch it, they want you to quarantine. But other than that, I mean, if you're vaccinated and you are exposed to it, you just have to take a home test and then you're good to go. Yeah. So, but let's not date ourselves too much with talk about COVID. But
next week, COVID's going to be gone. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know when this actually airs as a podcast, it'll probably be gone. But
yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, but it's good. I think it's always actually kind of nice when you like date the episode, talk about what happened that day or that week.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of timing. Like, I did an episode yesterday with Avi Goldman,
cool.
who got his start in Spark Post. He's totally like
and he's doing Parcel now, right?
Yeah, he created Parcel from nothing. So he's the boy wonder, I call him, because he's only 24 years old and he's off to a great start. But
nice.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself, leading email companies and being your whole life really. Most of your professional life is all about email, right?
Yeah, so like when I was 24, I don't know what I was doing. I think I was working in a bar or something. I was maybe DJing. I was DJing by then, but I can't remember when that would have been. Yeah, so I was not doing. Actually, I maybe was starting off doing email. So like, yeah, my background, I guess, is I've worked in like web agencies, advertising agencies, whatever, like, and studied as a designer at uni. And was into design like kind of from being a teenager onwards, I guess. So like I kind of ended up doing email because I was bouncing around lots of different ad agencies, and at the time, like there was a big kind of freelance contractor scene. I don't know if that still exists anymore, but like it was pretty much like an ad agency would be like, hey, we need someone to come in for a week, like come and do this big project for a client and then go. So like there was a huge kind of group of freelancers that ad agencies would call upon. So like I did that for a few years and worked in a whole bunch of places. And then I ended up one day covering for someone at eDialogue, which is like a email ESP. Like they got bought a couple times and then turned into, I think there's Zeta Interactive, part of that sort of conglomerate, whatever that group of companies is now. So I ended up staying there for like 6 years. And I'd done some email stuff before, but like it was initially I kind of stayed because like I was like, oh, this is like massive clients and we could do really creative work for them. And no one really cares because it's email. So I was like, I'm going to stay here and my portfolio is going to be great because like I've got, I had like British Airways, IKEA. We did like London 2012, like did all of the stuff for the Olympics, which is like crazy to have in your portfolio as a designer, right? And then and just being around all those projects, like especially a lot of those things are kind of through the line, like like you're working with people doing billboards and the overall branding and all that kind of stuff. So that was cool. I worked there for like 6 years, 7 years, about 6 years, and then went back to being freelance in like 2012. I was like, I want to, you just get itchy feet after a while. That's like a saying, like, I don't know if that's...
I know. Well, it's like, in our private conversation, I learned Brill. I learned Brill like 2 weeks ago from a client. And he wants to be Brill. And I was like, what are you saying? What is that good or bad? Yeah.
I don't know if itchy feet, if that's an English saying, but like, that means I wanted to go somewhere.
It means like you wanted to get somewhere else. Yeah. It's time to move on. All right.
Wasn't like some kind of fungus or something. So I went and basically freelanced, and I was like, I'm going to work from home and just do go freelance and do some stuff at home for a while. And what was interesting is that I walked out of eDialogue and had there'd been a rotating door. Like I didn't realize at the time, but like a lot of campaign people, advertising people, whatever, like they'd worked there for 6 years, for like a year or so, and then bounced to somewhere else. So like after 6 years, it's like I updated my LinkedIn. And like a whole bunch of people were like, "Oh, great! Like I worked with you previously. Like we did these really cool projects. Can you come and do this for me?" And like there's a whole bunch of people at other ESPs or other brands or whatever. So I ended up like walking into some pretty good freelance work kind of straight away. So I did that for a year. And I'd been kind of doing little bits while I was at Action Rocket, while I was at eDialogue, kind of coming in at 6 a.m. to do like 3 or 4 hours work before the day starts and stuff like that. And then so I kind of built like a bit of a nest egg if it all went wrong. And and then after a year, I was like, I've got too much work. So I hired a couple of people that I had worked with in the past. And then that kind of turned into Action Rocket pretty quickly. And now Action Rocket is like 25 people, 30 people, something like that. And yeah, we have like we actually just reopened our office. We kind of closed our office for COVID and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we're back in London, which is cool. We have like another office out where I am now, which is like you kind of have to have an office to give the bank and stuff like that. You know, like an address. So like we were never kind of totally remote, but like, you know, most people have been working at home, and now we're back in London, this sort of nice big office, all that kind of business. Yeah, and I kind of got into the industry that way, I guess. So I've been doing email for like 15, 20 years, I guess, at this point. Yeah. So that's
all right, awesome.
Yeah, that's where we are now.
All right, what do you see in your inbox that make you cringe?
Mm-hmm. That's not one of the questions.
Yeah, it's not. Surprise.
So like a big thing for me, and this might cross off like kind of top tips and things like that, is like, so for me, and I guess it maybe goes back to that advertising background. Like I worked at this agency long time ago, like 20 years ago, whatever, and it was drilled into us, this idea of like, you have to have a concept, you have to have a message in what you're doing. Like, you can't just chuck a load of text out and hope for the best. Like, and especially in other channels, like email is fairly cheap to produce and get out. But like, if you're making a billboard or a TV show, a TV advert or whatever, like you're putting a load of money behind it, like thousands of pounds behind it. So like, you've got to have a really strong message that resonates with people and all that kind of stuff. And like, to me, like that, I think is like the number one thing for like making a successful email campaign. Is that it's actually got to resonate with people. It's got to be useful. It's got to help them. It's got to excite them. It's got to fulfill their needs in some way. And like, so the thing that makes me cringe is kind of when you see stuff and you're like, so obviously, like, you know, I guess like having worked behind the scenes, like you can look at an email and be like, oh, I know what the brief was here. Someone said like, we've got to sell all these t-shirts and I don't care about anything else. Just get an email out and try and sell them. And obviously no one wants them. Like, you know, or whatever. Like, so that kind of thing, like stuff where it's obvious that it's just like the end result is get something out the door rather than actually achieve a goal. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, could you just repeat it? Because I think that exact, what you just said was like garbled. I didn't really come in clear.
Oh, sorry. So like the end result really is like, it's got to achieve a goal. And the goal has got to be like a tangible thing for the business. So like when you see an email that is just like, oh, everyone just wanted to, like the goal to them was get the email out the door and that's it. And it doesn't really matter whether it's any good or not. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, oh, come on guys. Like this is, not only does this kind of not help what you're doing, but also all of this stuff chips away at the value of the channel. So like,
right.
You know, if everyone was doing that, no one would look at their email anymore.
Right. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, is your Wi-Fi like really strong? Because you just got garbled again.
Oh, sorry.
I'm wondering. Yes, make sure you're like really.
Let me have a look.
Yeah, or I'd say like maybe shut off the video if needed be. You know,
yeah,
the audio's.
Let's have a look. Oh yeah, I'm on like 60. So my download is like 68.
Okay, let's
see what
solid.
Is. Yeah, should be all right. Yeah, it's like 17, 18. Going
so
up.
It should be good. All right, maybe it's mine.
It should be good.
Right.
You're coming through good, so I don't know.
Okay, well, we had a comment. I wonder if anyone else heard the garbleness. I don't know if that's.
Let's see.
I don't know who's commenting. We get like garbage comments. I don't know what that's about. I'm not paying anyone, you know, on Fiverr to leave comments on my videos, you know. But
where is this live? Is it on LinkedIn?
We're on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube, and we're on Facebook.
Oh, cool, nice.
Yeah, but officially we have 0 eyeballs. But I don't think it knows. I don't know if it can count everyone. You know,
nice.
Like all of those places. Yeah.
Those things are all the game playing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how long did it take to get Action Rocket or taxi. We didn't really mention taxi yet, but taxi actually became the bigger of the businesses, right? Like, if that's fair to say.
I don't know. I think they're both about the same size. I'm not sure. Like, yeah. So like, taxi kind of came out of like a need that we saw pretty quickly, which was like we were making HTML, we were making design and campaigns for people, but also we were making like templates for marketers that wanted to do stuff, and they would come back to us like, a week later saying, hey, that work you did, can you change the content? Can you put this content in? Or can we do it? Like, as the marketer, and like, or the market, they'd be like, oh, we tried to change it and it's all gone wrong. Like, which is cool because that's, HTML and that kind of stuff isn't necessarily a marketer's skill set, like, or their strong suit or whatever. Like, there's lots of things that a marketer's got to do, especially in email, and they don't have to be digging into the HTML. So, like, getting an agency to do that kind of work is, on the one hand, it's good, but like, it's also like, it's good work, but also it's not the best use of like fairly expensive designers, developers. Like, it also tends to lead to like emergency mistakes or the emergency things that need to be changed. Like, mistakes come in quite often, all that kind of stuff. So like, we kind of quickly came up against that and we're like, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then around the same time, a customer came to us and was like, they were like a language school, and they wanted to make email in like 20, 30 different languages. So it was like, here's where you are, like on our online course, like, whether you're doing well, whether you're not doing well, what course, which module you've just finished, all that kind of stuff.
You're getting garbled again for the last like 10 seconds.
Okay. Is that working now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're back. Yeah, you're talking about the language school. They wanted 20 to 30 different languages.
Yeah. So they wanted to do like a whole bunch of email, and then there's not only 30 different languages, but also like a whole bunch of like different stages on where you were in the course, whether you're doing well, whether you're doing badly, all this kind of stuff. So like, they needed to make like, I think it was like 17,000 different combinations of HTML. And like, as an agency, we were like, oh, this is gonna be like £5 million to make, like, which is a lot. So we ended up making Taxi pretty quickly, and like, the version of Taxi that they had at the start wasn't what it is now, obviously, but like, basically a way for them to make those 17,000 emails quickly and without us doing it all for them. So it's kind of way to get content into a template, into an HTML, and then get it all into their ESP and get it all this sort of smart stuff set up so that the right people got the right bit of the email and all that kind of thing. And it kind of grew from there. But what was interesting is like, that first client was like, I mean, they're still with us, but like, they had pretty complex needs that took us, like, when we were trying to work out like, how do we solve this, they took us far beyond like, oh, this is just a build an editor that can get one bit of content into one email. Like, they had like a whole bunch of people that needed permissions and access control and all that kind of stuff. They needed API stuff to get into their ESP. They needed like management and even just understanding of like how multiple languages work. So like, German is like, the sentence structure is different. So it's not just translate these words, like, it's got to be rewritten. We did like Thai, Chinese, like Cyrillic for Russian languages. So like, there's a whole bunch of like really complex stuff we had to solve like right at the start. And I think that was really interesting because like, that meant that it pushed, like, we didn't solve all those things immediately, but we knew that we had to solve them. So we didn't kind of close off our ability to solve them by making a quick decision on a certain thing. So so that was pretty cool. So like, over time, like, Taxi grew to be something like, the other thing that we kind of realized pretty quickly was like, the problem is not just get the content in, it's also manage all these people and help like organize all this stuff, and systematically avoid errors from happening and stop the HTML from going wrong and all this kind of stuff. So like, like, Taxi kind of grew pretty quickly to being something that was like really strong for enterprise email creation, which is like a really hard job. Is it all going? Can you see?
Yeah, you got a little garbled, but it sorted itself out. Like it was like 2 seconds or 3 seconds of robot speak.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know what the problem is there. I think it's.
Yeah, it's true. You're on really strong, internet. I don't know. People that are watching, if you could comment, let us know if you're also hearing it like that. That would be really helpful.
That's so good.
Because I won't stop you if it sounds good. and the whole world besides my computer,
that's cool.
No problem. All right. So, what were the biggest challenges growing these businesses?
A lot of different things. So, there's a lot to do that you don't realize. So, when you're both Taxi and Action Rocket are solving a problem, right? So you've got a fairly decent idea of what the problem is to solve. Like you have clients that are very vocal in what problem they need solving and things like that. And doing that with software in particular is fairly straightforward because you can sit and think, okay, cool, this is what the outcome needs to be. Let's work out the best way for this to happen, systematically do it really smartly and all this kind of stuff. What you kind of have to learn going along is you have to build a business as well. And business means contracts and paying people, the entire structure of an HR function, even managing laptops and things are fairly straightforward. You can buy people a laptop and get them some software and whatever. But building an organization where it's clear, we try to build an organization that was fairly flat in terms of structure, but helping people understand where they're empowered to do what they think is best versus where there's a non-negotiable position that they need to follow. Is you have to really be strong in building that culture. And culture is not a static thing. It's something that has to be maintained, and you have to kind of keep on sort of shepherding it and stuff like that. So that kind of thing I thought was a really, I think we did it well, but it's a really hard challenge because there's no textbook. And with code, there's a right or wrong answer a lot of the times. And sometimes there's multiple answers and there isn't a perfect answer and whatever. But the rest of the stuff, you kind of just have to work it out as you go along. But yeah, I think when people look at kind of startups and entrepreneurial stuff and that kind of thing, it's really easy to be I'm just going to do my startup. And it's what is your startup going to do? It's I don't know yet. That doesn't matter. It's you're not the end result is not to do a startup in some way. It's to solve a problem. It's to help people. It's, you need to work out how financially. Yeah, exactly. And how are you going to deliver some value that you can then charge people money for and all that kind of stuff. That's the hard stuff. Yeah. And you never also get it right. You have to, well, you don't get it right first time, but also getting it wrong is what helps you get it right. So you have to make mistakes to be able to get there.
Right, for sure. So let's go to the flip side. So what do you feel were the biggest contributors to the success of the companies?
That's interesting. There's a few things. So one is we had a really good team. We still have a really good team. Both our Action Rocket and Taxi. I think hiring is really important. People talk about hire slowly and fire quickly. I think I can't remember. I think that's the way around that you want it. But you've got to. So you got to be really careful, but intentional about who you hire, and really understand how they're going to add value and things like that. And if it's not working out, you have to have those conversations. You can't just shy away from them or be oh well, let's just leave it and see how it goes. You've got to be very clear and not only have the right people, but kind of nurture them and get them to what's going to help the business and what's going to help them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that having a really strong team, I think is is a massive contributor, and like we get that wrong occasionally and that kind of stuff, but you learn as well what's how to kind of what the warning signs are and things like that as you go a bit. I think also, like, to some extent, that kind of network, I think, is really important. Like, being so like all that time at eDialogue, I think, was really good, because there's my kind of network of people that I could tap into, or not even to be like, hey, do you want to buy taxi? Just like, hey, look, how does email happen there? What's the challenge? Like, just to understand how they do stuff and to see problems people have and things like that. Like that's a massive help. I think the other thing is, it's just like, there's a lot of stuff that helps you, like a lot of little things that help you, and like one is just circumstantial. Like at the time, like sort of 2010ish, 11, like there was a bit of an email geek scene, but like around sort of 2008, like there weren't really many people putting out their thoughts on email design. Like there was an email industry, and there were people, the kind of, I guess, people who aren't only influencers, that kind of group of people. They were putting out a lot of content, but they were a lot more focused on deliverability, that kind of stuff. When they talked about creative, it was literally within the realm of like what words work and things like that. Like it wasn't really in depth of what I'd seen at creative agencies. So like I started writing a lot of stuff and had like a blog and on Twitter and stuff like that, kind of putting my thoughts out there, like, which I think like got a lot of traction, which was cool, because there was a kind of gap. There weren't many people doing that. There was like Roz Campaign Monitor, there's Justine at Litmus, there was a few other people putting stuff out, but not a huge amount of people. Anna at Style Campaign. And then over time, I think like 2012, 2013, I was doing some stuff with Litmus. Like we did before, like what is now Litmus Live, there was the email design conference, and then before that, we did like a little thing in Boston at like the Litmus office, and there's literally like 30, 40 people. It was called the Dark Art of Mobile Email. And we spent like a day with like a whole bunch of people kind of doing like a workshop of how to code mobile. Like that was when responsive was first kind of coming out and no one really knew how to do it. Yeah. Is that coming out? Now you're blurry a bit. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, really? So maybe it was my internet that's, I have that, like, you probably have the same thing, you have like a little Wi-Fi kind of things. I have one, it goes from 1 to 2 dots, like it could be really? Like I have a daughter home on Zoom. Zoom. Okay. Like there are other things happening on my internet here that definitely could be hurting my my upload speed.
Okay. Mine is all right. Like it's on a cable and stuff, so hopefully it's all good.
Yeah, I have cable, but it's cable to like a Wi-Fi, like to a mesh network box.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So it's pretty strong, but it's not really like to the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting. It's very dated, like the big mobile, yeah, I mean, it was really wild because it was really like an incredible change, that like you could design an email for mobile, but it was very like 2012. I think Chad White was talking about this, like when I had him on, like that was like, he was kind of annoyed that he was like really like lamenting that like there's still emails that come in not optimized for mobile, like in 20, like it's like 10 years later, a decade later, where like 90, whatever it is, 70% of people are opening their emails on their phone first, and yeah.
No, absolutely. It's but I mean, like even that, like mobile did, I think, helped us a lot, because there was, people had been chucking out the same creative for years. They hadn't really thought about how to do it in a productive, in an efficient way, and also like mobile was forcing them to do something about it. So like we just being there when there was a whole bunch of people saying, "Oh, we need to level up our email," like was good for us. Like we grew a business off that, definitely.
Right, like you could do mobile. You could, that was like a big boost to the whole business.
Yeah, totally.
All right, cool. All right, what was the most surprising thing that you've learned, in the last 10 years, let's say?
I've learned a whole bunch of stuff about legal. That's not very exciting, but yeah, like I think the thing you realize that you don't see when you're looking, unless you're involved in like running a business, is like the stuff that has to happen that you don't see even when you're an employee, like, is crazy. Like just the amount of things that have to be done, and the amount of sort of things you have to be responsible for, and therefore if you're responsible you have to be involved in. So like legal is one. Like through all the time that Taxi was independent, like I was involved in every legal conversation, and Will, the co-founder with me, was as well. Like, we were CEO and CTO, like we didn't really have a legal counsel. We had an external counsel, but like just the amount of stuff that you're involved in, I think is one of the biggest surprises. The other thing is like when you're an employee, I think you see, even when people talk about, I'm not going to make any friends with this point, but it's from a good place. Hopefully it won't cut out in a point where I say something awful, but like
oh yeah, no, that's exactly. It's funny because it's the same phrase Andrew Bonar gave when he started talking about privacy protection.
Right.
he's a big advocate. He doesn't download anything in his email. Yeah.
So like when people talk about like salary, right, and you as an employee, I completely get it. Like, oh, my salary is this, or why, the result of salary surveys and all of this kind of stuff, salaries should be higher. Okay, cool. I completely get that as an employee, right? And I'm an employee now. What I think you don't necessarily realize is businesses on the whole aren't sitting there going, how can we screw over our staff? Like almost always they're like, how do we do the best for our team so that we can pay them as much as we can and support them as much as we can so that they don't leave, right? Because like as one reason, because when people leave, it's expensive. Like apart from anything else, as a cold hard business, like you've got to then hire people, you've got to offboard them. There's a whole load of knowledge that leaves the business. You've then got to get someone else up to speed. It takes about 6 months to get someone like fully up to speed if you're going to replace someone, and all of this kind of stuff. So like that kind of like, I think like that kind of view of like, oh, my salary's low, or the salaries could be higher or should be higher or whatever. It's like, yeah, cool, completely, I get that. But like, I think it is somewhat naive to a whole bunch of other factors that go on. Like, if nothing else, like if I paid, so say I pay you, like if you're working in the UK and I paid you like 50 grand or something like that, right? I would, as a company, you also have to pay national insurance on top of that, and you have to, and actually national insurance comes out of that, but like you have to pay employers, employers NI, which is like on top of that. You also have to pay like a whole load of equipment. You have to then have a bigger office. An office, like the overhead for our office was fairly big amount of our revenue, like all of this kind of stuff. So like you don't realize at the time, like actually employing someone is more than just the salary you give them. So like I think, sorry, this is a bit of a rant, but like, yeah, that's one thing that you.
No, it's totally fine, and I get it. I mean, the same thing is true in Israel. Like, salary is salary. Employers pay pension. They contribute to a pension. They contribute to what we call bituach leumi is national insurance. The same. It's direct translation.
So like,
there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, if you pay someone a salary, like often you're paying 40-50% on top of that in other stuff. And if you pay them more salary, that number goes up as well. Quite often. So yeah, like that kind of thing, I think was a surprise to me, because I've never been, I've never run a business, and I'd always seen it.
I think what you're hitting on is that most businesses are not making money like hand over fist, and just pocketing tons of money. The people at top are pocketing millions every year while they pay. Everyone's getting
exactly
£50,000 a year. That's not the story at all. It's most people are struggling by and keeping the lights on. And they're happy with that.
And often, like when you have money to spare, in inverted commas, like you use that to reinvest in your business. Like especially, but like both Action Rocket and Taxi are like bootstrapped. Like we've not taken any funding, so like if you have, you gradually get to have some money coming in that is spare every month, whatever. Like you're like, what do we do with this? Do we hire someone? Do we give everyone more money? Do we, buy some other thing? Like do we get a bigger office? Like all this kind of stuff. Like, and you can't spend it on everything. So you have to be really intentional about what you're going to do. And that's pretty hard, especially in a company when you're growing a company. Like if you're a fairly more mature business, and then it gets a bit easier. But like that's a big both challenge and surprise, I think.
Right, yeah, for sure. All right, so now we're switching modes, kind of.
Sure.
So, what do you love so much about email marketing?
So a few things. So one is, so like I've worked in lots of digital stuff. I've worked in lots of kind of analog, real world stuff as well. And like it's email's pretty fast. Like obviously a lot of Taxi is about making it easier for people and getting it to be done quicker and more effectively. But like it's compared to like other channels, like email's pretty cheap and it's pretty fast to get out there. Which means two things. Like one is it doesn't have to be perfect every time. Like being done is better than perfect a lot of the time. And also you can learn because you send so much of it. You can see what happens, you can see what works, and then you can incorporate that learning next time. Whereas quite often, and the results are pretty immediate as well. Now they're changing a little bit with MPP and things like that, but like in broad terms, like you see the result of your work pretty quickly. And what that means is you can continue to grow and start doing other stuff in a way that you can't really in, if you're making like even a website is a huge amount of work to get off the ground and live and then tends to kind of sit there and stagnate a bit. The other thing that I like about email is it's not owned by anyone. So obviously like you have to pay to get email out the door in some way. Like you have to pay people to do the work. You have to pay an ESP to get it into the world and all this kind of stuff. But like it's, if you're doing social, like you've just got a big old bill that you got to pay Facebook or Meta or whatever they call themselves. Like, and the same for Google for, advertising and Twitter and wherever else. So like those channels are great and they're useful, but also they're closed. And if Facebook come in one day and say, not only, they can say, hey, the price has gone up, but also they can say, hey, this functionality isn't available anymore. We're not doing this. You can't do this. So like that control is in our hands as marketers more in email.
For sure. All right. Okay, so what do you do in your role, your current role? Are you still leading Action Rocket? Are you still doing Taxi? Your Spark Post? Is Taxi still called Taxi, or it's now Spark Post Taxi? I don't know.
So the easy part of that is Action Rocket. So Action Rocket like has a team that looks after it. So I'm involved in conversations and stuff, but like day to day, I'm good. Taxi. So I was the CEO at Taxi, and then obviously we got acquired by Spark Post. So I've transitioned now to a role working with George and Chris. So George was the founder at Spark Post, and then Chris was CTO maybe at eData Source, which was another company acquired by Spark Post. So we work in a team called the Evangelist team. The Evangelist team does a few things, but so one is the kind of fairly obvious, like go out, do talks, things like this, whatever. The other thing is we do a lot of work internally, kind of helping other teams, like as a kind of source of like knowledge and kind of subtle direction, without saying, hey, you should do this. Like, so like being able to kind of just be useful in lots of small ways, but crucially, like, not be like, right, this is a sales deal and I'm going to run it or anything like that, you know. Like, so I'm involved in a whole load of conversations and helping sort of nudge things in directions that are good, but also it's not like I'm running the business or anything. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, like, because I'm involved in so many conversations, like, I can link people together pretty easily. So we kind of help stop people working in silos quite often without people knowing, especially working remotely and things like that. So I can be like, oh, look, so there's 2 other people who are also working on solving this problem. Let's all get everyone together and see, you know, how we do this. The other thing is SparkPost. So after Taxi was acquired, like literally like the week after, I think, SparkPost was acquired by MessageBird.
Okay.
So MessageBird is a big company they're called CPaaS, which is communication platform as a service, I think.
Okay.
Might be customer platform.
Sounds right.
I need to check that. But sorry, Robert, if you're watching this. Yeah. So
yeah, it's funny because like we've never heard of MessageBird. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
as email marketing people, we're like, what the hell's MessageBird? Like,
yeah,
out of nowhere.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But then you see, and you're like, oh, that's who they are. Like, they do all this stuff. So MessageBird is, when we talk about like omnichannel and all that kind of stuff, like MessageBird is omnichannel in the way that, like, what we do in email is one part of, like, MessageBird does push and SMS, WhatsApp, all this other kind of stuff, and does that at scale for massive companies, governments all around the world. So like, where that's going to go is really exciting. So like, I've just been working on like a big sales engagement that's multi-channel, but also in lots of different like in-depth multi-channel, rather than just like, hey, by the way, you can send a text message. It's like, great, we didn't want to. Like, yeah, so that's really exciting. Like, seeing where that's gonna go is really cool. And applying some of those things. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we know as people who work in email, like about like how communication works, how to convince people stuff, like, you know, kind of core marketing skills, but also like how to react to data, how to make stuff instantaneous and things like that. So applying a lot of that stuff into different channels, I think is really exciting. So yeah, seeing where that goes is pretty fun.
Okay, this question isn't in there, but I'm just curious. Like, is Taxi going to be continuing to develop, and you know, is it still constant development? Like,
yeah, absolutely. So like, so one thing that people kind of asked us, especially at the start of the acquisition, is like, so like Taxi was works with any ESP. Like, you can get your code out as a zip file anyway, but like you can also plug into Salesforce or Responses or Oracle or, you know, whatever.
You're dating yourself.
Well, yes. Yeah. Well, like, I'm trying to remember the new ones. So like
Klaviyo.
Yeah, Klaviyo, Iterable, people like that. So we work with those as well. What's interesting is, you know, like we solved the problem for some of the people working with older ESPs because they were kind of not stuck, but like they were so entrenched with working with them, like they couldn't really quickly move. So like they were like, look, let's use this for production, and then we plug into our current ESP. But anyway, so like one thing people asked was like, okay, cool. So now you're owned by SparkPost, you're just going to cut off all the connectors? It's like, no, like SparkPost inherently like works with almost every ESP. Like somewhere, I think it's like the top 15 ESPs or something like that. Like SparkPost is involved in some way in email getting out of the door. Like, I don't want to break any NDAs, but like,
right, you know, I understand that. Yeah, we talked about
SparkPost does a lot of stuff. And isn't in the same, like, in the way that you might look at a sort of more traditional ESP and be like, oh, so, you know, they need to own the entire journey and won't work with anyone else, or whatever. Like, SparkPost is the opposite of that. Like, we work with a whole bunch of people and power.
Right, like they'll handle any part of it.
Yeah, exactly. So like Taxi is like still absolutely working with any and all ESPs. obviously like being closer to SparkPost is great because we can have conversations about like we built a lot of stuff without being involved with any ESPs. So like now being able to have these conversations, being like, okay, cool. So like, what would make it easier for us to do this? And then
you have the connection.
Yeah, exactly. So say, okay, cool. So like, could you change your API to do this, and it would help us, and it would help you, and whatever, like. So just being open to those conversations is really exciting, not just at SparkPost, but with all the other ESPs as well. Yeah. So absolutely, like Taxi is doing the same thing that we were always doing and set out to do, just at a much bigger scale. Yeah, it's cool that it's like we were able to do this and continue like what we were set out to do in a way that, like the other options to do that are things like take VC funding, do some kind of partnership, all that kind of stuff. So like, I think this is the nicest way to be able to do this. And it's really like exciting seeing where what we've done already, but where we're going next is pretty cool.
That's great. Were you approached by other companies? Like, was anyone else interested in acquiring Taxi? Is it like an ongoing thing for years, or it just kind of happened?
Again, like a lot of this stuff is NDA'd, right? But like,
you get. Okay.
I mean, the NDAs exist. That kind of answers your question.
But yeah, NDA.
You get fairly often you have people have conversations like, and quite often they're just nonsense. Like, there's some professional company buyers, like. Or companies that like they just want to build a group of companies. They don't care what they buy. So like, you're like, what else is in your portfolio? And they're like, well, there's a refuse company. It's like, okay, cool. Like, whatever.
Got it. Like, you didn't see how that would be like helping the brand much.
Yeah, I said this on another podcast, but like, there's one that we spoke to, and then they kind of gave away. Like they said, like, oh yeah, that company, we kept the management team. I was like, oh, okay, like that's what's going to happen here. Like, so yeah, like you do have these conversations, but again, it's a bit like saying you're doing a startup, right? Like you don't sell your company to anyone. You have to be really sure about where you're going to go and how it's going to what's going to happen afterwards. How it's going to be valuable to them, that kind of thing.
All right. Cool. All right. So what are your top 5 email marketing tips for 2022? I feel like they haven't changed so much since 2021. I just feel like you have to structure these questions this way.
Yeah. So like, well, it's probably going to be like the year of mobile again, right? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. So like, I think like what I was kind of saying before, like the same thing is like, you've got to have a decent message. If your message sucks, like nothing else will help. Like, you might get an incremental uplift by doing something flashy or some technique or something, but if ultimately the product you're selling or the message you're putting across isn't going to resonate with people or isn't solving a problem, then there's nothing else that you can do really without addressing that. So that's like my number 1 tip, but like it's big enough to also be like 2 and 3.
It's like have a strong brand. That's what it sounds like to me. Like, have a really strong brand that means something. Like,
but
that stands
ultimately, for something. And when people say like, oh, hey, how do I not go into the promo box, promo tab or whatever? It's like, send good email and people will seek out your email. Like, that's
right.
The more people open your email, the less chance you have of it just going into some tab somewhere, right? So like,
right. And especially if we're engaged, I think, we have our own Gmail accounts where like the brands we like float to the top.
Yeah. And exactly. And not just for specific users, but on aggregate, then Gmail goes, oh, well, 50% of people really love these emails. For the other 50%, let's bump it up a bit for them as well. Like, so like, ultimately, like doing good work, not taking shortcuts and just doing it well. And like, ultimately we know what that is. Sometimes we ignore our voices doing that, but like, so ultimately I think that's the the big tip. Obviously, like, we're at the point, we had this conversation about mobile, right? 10 years ago, people were like, how do I deal with mobile? Like, we're now in a similar position with things like dark mode. Like, we're trying to work it out. Dark mode, the goalposts are moving a little here and there. Like, Gmail renders it a different way to Outlook. That renders it to a different way to iOS, which is similar to how mobile was 5-10 years ago, right? And eventually things do.
It was a good time to shout out to your team, to Jay in particular, to write a great article about how to adapt for dark mode.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's staying up to date with that, like trying it out and seeing how it goes, but also learning as you go and improving and stuff. Like it isn't the case of like add this code and it starts working. Like you got to kind of change your mindset a bit. So yeah, doing that kind of thing. So yeah, dark mode is a big thing. There's been a lot of talk about accessibility. So I think like if you're not doing that much stuff about accessibility, thinking about that a lot more is an important thing for 2022 onwards. Again, it's not something where it's like, oh, you do this and now it's accessible. There are some code things to think about, but also increasingly it's a mindset, right? Like if you're writing content that is triggering people with anxiety, or people are autistic and they read your content in a certain way, or whatever, like people who have epilepsy, that kind of thing. Like there is no code to just make it work for them. Like you have to change your approach. You have to consider these people and change your marketing approach accordingly. And also people aren't autistic or not, or then, like there's a massive, there's literally the autism spectrum, but like people aren't like they need accessibility or not. Like there's a huge range of all different reasons and ways that people need these things, and it's ultimately like everyone needs that kind of stuff at some point. Like needs your emails to be accessible to them. People talk about like this idea of situational needs as well as like permanent needs and things like that. Like if like audio doesn't really apply to email, but like people might be completely deaf, or they might be situationally in a bar or something like that. Like, and in both of those places or situations, like if you're trying to get a message across audibly only, it's not going to work. So like you have to consider that. So like what is that for email? How do we think about that?
Right. Like if we use WhatsApp, how many times have we had to write like, I can't listen now, can you send the message?
Yeah,
like...
exactly. There's a stat, I can't get the solid number, but like if you put video onto social, there's a massive amount of people just aren't hearing the audio on that. Like because they're on the train or on the bus, or people do have audio on the bus, but that's annoying. But like, or they're in bed or whatever. Like, so you've got to make sure that subtitles work for those videos, right?
Right.
So yeah, like all of that kind of stuff, like working on accessibility is a massive topic, but if you don't solve it all straight away, at least understanding the challenges, I think is a good thing to start on for 2022. And then the other kind of stuff, like I've been learning a lot about deliverability a lot more because Spark Post doesn't.
Now. Yeah, right. Like, that's one of the main things they're worried about, right?
Yeah. Sure. And like it's so far beyond this idea of like, oh well, there's these spammy words and you shouldn't add these, like, or or even just can I put this code in and get into the promo tab or whatever, or get out of the promo tab. Like so much of it is kind of algorithmic, so much of it is specific to an individual user. Like a lot of stuff comes down to like there are some technical best practices, but so much of it comes down to just do well, do a good, don't take shortcuts basically, and do it well.
Have a strategy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So it sort of like flips on that, but yeah, I wonder if like you haven't mentioned this at all, but like image only emails, I still get a ton of them. And I feel like a lot of even like the big brands, when I talk about my competitors, agencies are just like, because I have to get emails out so fast, it's just the easiest way to do it. It's just, images.
Yeah.
It bothers me because I know they're doing well with it, but it's definitely not best practice.
No, absolutely, and it's not very good for accessibility at all. Like there's, it's also hard production as well. Like it means you have to go back to Photoshop every time, or your image tools. Like it is actually harder to get it out the door quite often. Like all image emails, they do have a place. Like images have a place in emails. Hiding all of your content inside an image or trapping it inside an image is maybe not the way to go. But again, like people kind of do learn and evolve out of it eventually, so it's not completely terrible. Yeah, so I have an email mistake story I can tell you if you're good.
Yeah, everyone loves email mistakes. My best, my all-time, record, LinkedIn post was about an email mistake. So people love mistakes. So go for it.
All right. So one time, so this isn't directly mine, but I was involved in the project. So like for London 2012 for the Olympics, right? So I mentioned we were working on that. So there was a whole bunch of in the run up to that, like it was, the run up was like 2 years or something. We were managing a campaign for if you want to be a volunteer. I think they were called games makers, maybe. And there was a huge amount. There was like 80,000 people or something involved in like, showing up, being kind of stewards and things like that, but also like just being involved somewhere in the process, volunteering. There's a big kind of national, attention on this and getting people to give up their time and be involved in it and whatever. And it was one of those kind of, hey, it'll be good on your CV kind of things. So there's like, I think like 500,000 people applied to be a games maker, something like that. It was a massive amount. And we were doing the emails, and obviously at that scale, you can't email everyone saying, hey, sorry, you're not going to, like you can't personally email everyone, you didn't pass the interview or whatever. So that was all being done by us, like as an ESP. And we wrote the creative for like, hey, you're successful, thanks, here's what's going to happen next. And we had an email saying, hey, we're so sorry, it's not going to happen, and the creative.
I'm like covering my mouth, like wondering what happened next,
So it was all loaded up on the ESP. For some reason, this was going out on like a Friday afternoon, which you should never do. So like, yeah, we had this all set up. It was all loaded up. We were like, okay, cool. It's going out at like 7 p.m. on a Friday or whatever it was. We're like, okay, cool. We're all good. We'll go to we always used to go to the bar, the pub at like 5 or something. So we all then like, okay, cool. That's all good. That's done. It's all scheduled. Let's go. Went to the pub. And then we were talking, we're like, oh, wouldn't it be really bad if we got it wrong? And then someone had their laptop, and we're like, look, can we just check? Like, we'd had like a couple drinks, and we're like, oh, let's just, before we go any further, let's just get checked. And it was wrong. Like, we had the wrong creative and the wrong.
Like the people who got rejected were getting the accepted email, and the people that were accepted were getting rejected. Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, and if that would have, luckily we were able to stop it, but only, it's almost like diffusing a bomb. Like it was within the hour. And that would have been like that would have been a newspaper level scandal.
Catastrophe.
Yeah, but luckily all was well, and we all lived to survive another day. But yeah, that would have been a disaster if it went wrong.
Awesome, it's a great story. All right, how do you see email changing in the next 5 years?
That's a good question. So I think like email's a weird channel in that I think partly because it isn't owned by anyone, like it doesn't change quickly. In the same, like Twitter or whatever will probably be massively different. So like one answer is like not much, but also it does change gradually, and it sometimes changes like there's something you see for ages and it doesn't change, and then something happens and it changes all at once. So like MPP is one of those. Like you could kind of see people have been talking about privacy for a number of years, and then all of a sudden like 40% of the audience is affected by something. So I think like that privacy stuff, I think is going to continue. Like I could see that being rolled out in different ESPs, different email clients. So I think we do need to adapt to that. If not, like technically we have to, we're not forced to. I think like conceptually we do. Like privacy is increasingly in the hands of an audience that is now more aware of privacy and the implications for it. So I think, like ethically, that's something we should be thinking about, regardless of whether systematically we're going to be allowed to do stuff or whatever. So I think that's going to be a big and continuing thing. Like dark mode, I could see again being one of those things where like all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've got to do this. I mean, we do kind of have to do it now, but like there would be a kind of technical change. It's like, oh, if you're not doing it, there's going to be problems. So I think like that's something to consider. I think like the other thing is yeah, like kind of in terms of not changing, like I think it's still going to be here. It's still going to be a channel, either one of the top or the top channel that generates money for people. So yeah, I don't see that kind of stuff going away. But yeah, I think maybe more awareness of privacy and stuff is probably the biggest thing.
All right, you've accomplished a lot. So what are you most proud of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think like being able to have a career, like being able to spend a lot of time, I've worked with a whole bunch of different teams and clients and things like that. So like just being able to work with lots of different people. I think like the people that I've been able to work with has been like is pretty cool. And like the teams that we've built over the years, doing various things, like not just Action Rocket and Taxi, but like we work as, especially on Action Rocket, like we work as partners. So like we work with like people at the BBC and spend time with them, or like the different like work with client teams as well. So like being able to do stuff with them, I think is really cool, and like working in a way that like that they appreciate and is different to how they work with other agencies and contractors and stuff like that, I think is really good. Like being able to talk, I think has been cool. Like go around, like I've traveled a whole load of places, being able to do talks and conferences and stuff. That's pretty fun. Like conferences are always a bit of a kind of double-edged sword, because like there is a business case to do them, but like really like it's a week out of your life going and doing, especially ones in America and stuff. So like you've got to want to do it. Like so yeah, like that's cool. Yeah, I think like just growing the companies and getting to where we are, I think, like, and being able to change. Like we've done a lot of email that's been successful and actually has hopefully kind of nudged the entire channel in a certain way to be better. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
All right, awesome. All right, we'll get some more fun questions. So what are your favorite brands in doing email?
In the inbox? Yeah, that's a good question. So like I like when like especially an e-commerce email is done well. So like part of that is just good segmentation and things, but also just executed well. So like it's a whole bunch of like retailers. Like John Lewis is one that I look at a lot. I don't know who else really. I like a lot of the newsletters. They kind of come and go, but like these kind of opinionated newsletters that you get from like I guess people who were on Twitter more, and then they got into more long form content. So like I think the inside emails, there's a whole bunch of those that are pretty cool, and like they focus on a whole bunch of topics. So like this inside cryptocurrency and inside whatever. So like yeah, those ones are cool. They've dialed down a bit now, but there's this guy called Jason Hirschhorn, who does, his company's called Media Redef, or Redef, and they so it's like a kind of came out of him like 20 years ago, sending out like a bunch of links every day to his network, and then he grew it into like a company. So like his emails, they're not sending a huge amount at the moment, but like I always check for those, because they're a nice mix of like a bit of an editorial rant and then like some really interesting things to read. Yeah, so those are probably the ones that I would like my go-to emails. And then everything else is like I'll dip in and see what's going on. Obviously I get a lot of email. Like I have like a inbox, like a burner email account just full of stuff.
10 million. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually just deleted from my main inbox. I don't pay for Google storage, so I deleted like 2004 to I don't know 2012 to make space for my emails. Yeah, but
yeah, mine is, so my all inboxes is 235,000 on my phone. So yeah, it's a lot of email.
There you go. It's a lot of email. It's a lot of email. All right, what are your favorite? Again, I feel like I gotta, adjust the spelling for you. The word favorite. Yeah, but yeah. What are your favorite campaigns? I mean, you've done Action Rocket. You've produced some pretty heavy duty campaigns. I'm just curious what your favorite campaigns are, whether in-house or out-house.
Yeah, so we've worked on a whole load of stuff. There's some stuff that's kind of glamorous, or looks glamorous. So we've worked with some pretty high-end brands. So that's pretty fun. I'm just thinking what's we're allowed to talk about. But yeah, there's a couple brands I can't mention, but the being able to go inside some pretty cool places and talk about email, but talk obviously the email team is in the building where the cool stuff happens. So I've been to Formula One offices, HQs and things like that, to talk about doing email for them and things like that, those kind of places, because you do get to afterwards have a wander around and look at all the cars that they have and that kind of thing. So that stuff's pretty fun.
Take a lap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One that stands out fairly recently is we did a whole bunch of stuff for the BBC around the election, which was in 2019, the last one, so just before the pandemic. And we were doing live results. And in the UK, there's 650 constituencies. So each one of those has a result and they're all called at different times. So there's a huge amount of data flying around. It's the BBC, so it's got to be completely accurate. You can't get it wrong. So it's pretty high stakes. And we were generating images on the fly, graphs and sort of change over the last election and all this kind of thing. So a lot of work and a lot of things to be aware of. So we worked on that project for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They did being able to see behind the scenes for a project like that. So a couple of days before, they were running. So you have your election coverage on the TV or whatever. They were running that a week before every night, with last year's data and stuff like that. And we were kind of watching and seeing our results in the email and our dummy run change at the same time. That kind of stuff was pretty fun because you get to see behind the scenes of how that stuff's done. And even on the night, we pulled an all-nighter and worked in in the newsroom at the BBC for when the result was out. So that kind of thing is pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's the best answer I think we've gotten so far.
Cool.
All right, we've reached the end, and this is just you have the floor. Just your own final thought.
Yeah, I don't know really. One thing that people ask me sometimes is how people reach out and ask hey, look, so my career's doing this, and how do I get to wherever? How do I do this? How do I do that? I want to do this. I think email is a pretty cool channel because it's you can work in whatever industry you want and do the email for it. So I think obviously people have to pay the bills and you have to get into a situation where you're comfortable and can whatever it is you want to do in life. But email is pretty good to support you in doing that. It's pretty solid and it's pretty results driven. So I think one thing I kind of say to those people is just try stuff. You don't really get when people say oh, I want to do this, but I'm not sure. I don't want to screw this up or whatever. It's it's not a dummy run. You try something, you enjoy it, and then you go and do the next thing. You kind of just have to have a go and try stuff and get to where you're going to go. I think, and along the way, there's that kind of Instagram picture of here's what success looks like, and it's all just a massive squiggle, and people think it's a straight line or whatever, which is super cliche, but it's true. You get things wrong a whole bunch of times. You have to learn from it, and sometimes it's really hard mistakes to make, and sometimes they're painful, but you have to go and process it and go and work it out and move on to, you know, and then work out where you're going to move forward from. Like, so yeah, like it's not like a linear binary journey. Like it's just kind of like everyone is working stuff out as they go along. So just go out and try stuff and see where you go. Sorry,
yeah, that's a great. No, that was great. That was really great. I mean, even one of my clients, like they almost went belly up like a few years ago because they had a bad partner and took the restaurant. That was the best, but like now they're doing great, you know. But I really think you know, like I guess every business has ups and downs, and it's really good to hear it from the guy who did one of those businesses and is still involved in that kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I see we have a comment. It might be gobbledygook, but yeah, it's gobbledygook. All right. Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you coming on, and it was a really great talk, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, no, it's good. Thanks for having us on. Cool.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's great, great to have a one-to-one. We haven't had that in probably in a while. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's so good.
All the best. Well, that's our show for today. Yeah, big thank you again to Elliot Ross of Action Rocket and Spark Post, Taxi for Email. Check them all out. They're all great. And yeah, and that's it. That's our show for today. Have a good one.